Okay, this is my extreme pleasure. I already told Tina that I was going to take credit, not for her accomplishments, but for asking her to come and join us. I saw Tina last year at CCLC, the League's conference, and as soon as the presentation was over, I made a beeline to her, got probably a little too close, I apologize, and said, and just trying to contain myself, but also trying to be really, make sure she understood that I was very serious, that I said, you must come and speak at our conference next year. And so here she is. This is great. All right, so I'm going to give a little bit of your bio, just to let you know. Tina Curiel-Allen is a queer Xicana Boricua living in Modesto and a recent graduate of Modesto Junior College and UC Davis with a major in Xicanx Studies. Did I get this right? Okay, good. During her time at UC Davis, she co-founded Beyond the Stats, an organization for formerly incarcerated and system-impacted students. Tina is also the communication specialist at MILPA, which stands for Motivating Individual Leadership for Public Advancement, an organization of formerly incarcerated and system-impacted constituents committed to supporting next-generation infrastructure and leadership within communities, organizations, institutions, and systems. Her writings and poetry have been published across multiple online platforms and in Teen Vogue. Tina's culture and experiences inform her work and her activism. Please join me in welcoming Tina Curiel-Allen.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Sounds a little echoey, but I think he's gonna figure it out. Move my hair? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Cualitlanesi, buenos dias. Those are just a couple ways of saying good morning for the blood that runs through my veins. My name is Tina Marie Curiel-Allen. I am the daughter of Gonzalo Juan Coryell and Eleanor Cecilia Vega Coryell. It's a new thing for me to introduce myself, probably the last few years, with my parents' names attached to me. And I do that to bring my parents' spirits into the spaces that I have gone to that they didn't expect I would go or didn't want me to go or for whatever reason, and to honor them, and that's part of my own healing as well. So I like to anchor myself that way to remember that I'm also connected to those that came before me. So a little bit about myself, why I'm standing up here. As they said, I'm a University of California, Davis graduate. I'm 37 years old. That bachelor's degree took me 11 years to get. 8 of those years were spent at community college. And I say that because that's representative of my life and my timeline, you know? So whatever timelines might be expected, or I feel like at community college it's open for anything, but yeah, 37 years old and 11 years on a 4-year degree, you know? So I'll lead you a little bit to how I got to that. So as I said, I'm 37. You know my parents' names now. I was born in Hayward. And my mom grew up in Oakland and my dad grew up in Hayward. And I'm formerly incarcerated, also generationally system impacted, and my father is formerly incarcerated and a lot of family members of mine. So my dad started serving time very young and was criminalized very young for being a dark Mexican kid in Hayward. So when my dad served time in YA, which is Youth Authority, now called DJJ, which we're working on trying to get closed, but that's another story, which is a youth prison, and it has a pretty brutal history. So when I was a kid, my parents, they moved us, they did a geographic, and they moved us from the Bay Area to Ceres, California, which is where they could afford a house and where they thought we'd be safer from their fears were the police and the streets. So we moved to Ceres. And that's where I grew up, which is just a little tiny town. And I'm one of 4 kids, and I say this as a success of my parents that only one of their kids was incarcerated, which is myself. And that's a success for my parents. for where they came from, for their expectations of possibilities and things like that. So I'm gonna share with you all like a lot of the boxes that I check to qualify, and then to also highlight the systems, histories, and things that I come from, and many students like myself. So they move us to series. I won't go into all my childhood and things like that. That's for another time and another story, because it's involved. But interesting things that I think affected me later, I started doing drugs at 12. After 7th grade, I never went to a traditional school. They put me on continuation school. Once a week, I would go to school for high school and things like that, which meant I didn't know how to learn in a group when I got to community college. You know, I didn't know how to be around a group of peers. I was doing drugs when I was a kid. I was reading a lot of books, bad books, fantasy, sci-fi, whatever. But learning things that I came in with, you know, and then all my learning styles were concentrated. So I'm a kinesthetic learner, so always wanting to have things held and things like that, which is just, I just want to put that out there because I know that a lot of things are going online for students on computers and things like that. And that was really hard for me as a student when I was at Davis, was that. Like, I would rather pay a few dollars to have it printed. So kind of just put that out there. I think kinesthetic learners will reclaim some stuff on handheld things. So anyways, you know, started doing drugs at 12 and, you know, graduated from the continuation school at 17, became a heroin addict by 18, and then started getting arrested. And I got sober in jail in my mid-20s, and through that, I was in jail for about 11 months. I served time in San Joaquin County and Stanislaus County. And then I got a prison sentence that led me to a program called Drug Court, which is a diversion program that I'm hopeful some folks in here are familiar with, or other diversion type programs. And so when I finished Drug Court, which is a 1.5-year program, that's when I started going to community college in my mid-20s. Not having been in a classroom since 7th grade, I had PTSD, I had a lot of things, you know, which is, I think, representative. The school took me that long, I was very afraid to go to school because I hadn't gone in so long. So I took one class, I took an English class because I always wanted to be an English high school teacher, and then I found out that the bureaucracy of high school, a lot of my friends who were teachers told me I wouldn't do well in that setting, so I gave up on that, but I still consider myself a teacher. So one class at a time, and my classes were in the evening. I worked full time. My dad at this point, my dad is still on the streets, experiencing homelessness, and my mom worked at Walmart, and I didn't have someone that was gonna help me with funds. I took evening classes. I didn't really get the benefit of whatever counselors might have been there that could have helped me, because when I did try to take work off and go to the counselors early on, they didn't really seem to know the type of advice to give a student like me. I remember I had told one of them, well, I'm doing this honors program and it'll get me into one of the UCs. And they really kind of didn't believe me and discouraged me and things like that, which that's fine. That's just highlighting, it's not fine, but highlighting, you know, I didn't really take advantage of the services, and I can't speak of what they were, but when I did try to, I didn't feel seen and I didn't feel heard. So I still excelled at that school, you know, and it was really through individual relationships with my professors and my mentors and things like that. One class at a time, and then I would take maybe 2, so that's how it ended up taking that long. I worked full time, and I got a really good education that way through my professors and mentors, one of them who's here. And I want to tell this little story, not just because James Todd is here, but because this is also representative of, you know, I was a smart kid. And so when I came in, it's like people could probably tell that I was smart. But I was also pretty broken and pretty afraid and didn't have community and didn't know where to find that community in that institution. So the first time James Todd came up to me and was like, you know, you're really smart. You should be in this honors program. I was just sure he must be trying to hit on me, or that it couldn't be for anything else, right? And I just like shut it down and put it away. And then like 2 years later, I think, took a class with him and he became one of my mentors. I took as many classes as I could with him. You know, so I tell that story just to say that we don't know what people will hear or when they will hear it. And sometimes it takes like 8 person telling somebody something, and if we're number 1 or number 2, it's still very important, you know? So thank you for that, James. I did end up doing some honors courses with him and things like that. So, you know, at Modesto Junior College, I did that honors program. It gave me an opportunity to take about 5 classes as like research classes, or I got to do additional projects and things like that, which shaped my politics and shaped what I would want to do later. I wasn't a part of anything on campus because I worked during the day, you know, and for math, because I was behind in that, I tried to take that math class 3 times in the evening, and I couldn't do the pre-algebra with that professor, so I had to take time off work and go during the day and things like that. And these are just things to highlight sometimes some of the struggles that I know not everybody has control over, but you know, one person's experience with things. So yeah, 8 years, and then I got to Davis, and that took me 3 years, so I guess I like to take things slow. They wanted me to stay another year, but I was like, no, I think I can leave now. And it was really at UC Davis when I had time to fully have all my energy towards schooling that I got political and more involved in student organizing and in things like that. I was in recovery for a long time, so I felt like I didn't have time. I was doing work for my community privately, so I didn't really have time to do things publicly, I felt like. And then when I got to UC Davis, I was a sociology major. I thought all my life experience would apply there, from addiction to incarceration to generational traumas and things like that. And then when I got there, it didn't work out that way in that department. Pretty early on, I started looking around and thinking, where are the students like me? I know they're here. I know I'm not the only one that feels like I'm the worst person in the room. I know I'm not the only person that like didn't have those experiences at 18. Like, I just didn't know where to find them, you know? So we got offered this project, and we got offered to pitch a project that we could do, and what I wanted to do was to find other formerly incarcerated students. And we got put in a group of 5, and 3 of us were formerly incarcerated, and that was our interest. So that's how we first met. And then we found out we couldn't ask people if they were formerly incarcerated. We couldn't ask all these things, which I understand why. So what we decided to do was to be the ones standing up in the classes and saying, I'm formerly incarcerated and system impacted, and we're trying to gather students. And that was interesting, and I sat in a lot of sociology professors' departments at UC Davis trying to get support, and for one reason or another, which I can't speak for them, they didn't want to touch it. You know, for whatever reason, I don't know why. We did find support though. We found support in ethnic studies, which is how my major, they didn't have like a broad ethnic studies major, so my major ended up being Xicanx Studies. And you know, being in that situation and being in that institution, we got to start finding the similarities with each other and with our struggles, and finding that what we wanted was really representation and that type of community that we didn't feel like we had anywhere else. Places where we weren't going to feel like either the worst person in the room, or that our experiences were different, or that our questions weren't things that we wanted to ask at a group level because we felt they were like so base or things like that. So we started this group called Beyond the Stats. And at first it was just us getting together and checking in, things like that. Then we ended up, I guess I'm into propaganda, you could say, so we ended up making zines, because that's an easy way to get stuff out, right? And our platform unintentionally ended up being a lot about that what we were telling our stories on our own terms, but also qualifying our stories with telling folks like, you know, this isn't coming for free, or this is coming with context, or things like that, and trying to really push that along with our stories, because stories, even though they're very important, they're not enough without that other context. And then other things that we found when we were there was the formerly incarcerated students that we knew, their struggles are different, you know? There's a reason I'm standing up here. Like, I speak well. I had a lot of practice in recovery rooms speaking. To expect that from all formerly incarcerated students in general is not always realistic. And so we learned some lessons on the importance of having system-impacted folks around us, the importance of having someone right next to us that could say, hey, me too, or my sister, or like, let me say this name and let me talk about this. We learned those things as we were organizing on the ground. And that was really helpful. And other things that we ended up, at that university, we ended up not seeing what we were looking for. So we also did a student-led class called Education is Freedom, AKA America, This Is How You Made Me, that we wrote the syllabus for. And that class was really about looking at social location, looking at power relationships, strictly subjective, strictly through narrative. Like, let's look, we used George Jackson, Leonard Peltier, Assata Shakur, Malcolm X, we used Xicana feminists, we used James Baldwin, all those folks that are on those intersections, and strictly through subjectivity, because we had had enough of the research telling us, you know, here's this, I won't get into my criminology things, except for that we had had enough of research telling us about ourselves, you know? So that class was really, really successful. And the reason that it was, I mean, the structure of it was different. We had it in a circle. We had it as like a consciousness raising group, inspired by certain things, inspired by things from the 60s and bell hooks and things like that. And I think it was also the invitation for others to be seen, you know, and I think that's really important. And without that invitation or without that representation, some people might not know what they're looking for, or they might not know what it looks like even within themselves. So that class really taught us a lot, and then we got to pass it on to the other students, and it ended up really inspiring a lot of them. And I'll stop talking about Beyond the Stats a little bit right now, except for to say that it's actually going to become an initiative at UC Davis. Near the end of this year, our advisor, Dr. Ofelia Cuevas, she kind of took it on to get it larger and to have it also include administration and staff and things like that. Because with folks getting out and with all these laws changing, the community's only growing, right? And there are those family members, I mean, for our mentor, Professor Cuevas, for her, it had never occurred to her to talk about her family and her dad and dropping off her brother at prison and things like that. Until she saw us, like the students actually inspired her, which I'm really proud of that because we kind of butted heads a little bit. I'm a confessional poet, so I feel like I lead with all my stuff, in case you can't tell. I think it's important, you know, you want to see what a formerly incarcerated person looks like, you want to see what a former heroin addict looks like, you could look at me, you know? Not everyone is like that, and I'm not pushing that on everyone, but I think it's important for representation. And so yeah, at UC Davis, I'm really proud of the work that we did there. And it does lead to things that, when I was thinking about speaking here and thinking about what helped me succeed as a student, when I think of at junior college, it was specialized relationships and individual attention with professors, which is not realistic for all students, nor do all students want that. But that's what worked for me, you know? And then when I was at Davis, it was kind of building what I needed and things like that. But when I think about community colleges where everyone's coming in, right? So when I think about what I would want for community colleges, I'm gonna go for the things like representation. I'm gonna go for the things like that those students, those formerly incarcerated and system impacted students are already in your classes. And that they already have a lot of that kind of experiential knowledge that's gonna help other students and that can be lifted up in certain ways. I would think that that would mean if you don't know who those students are, potentially maybe you're not making enough space for them, you know? And I mean that by things in the classroom, like how can space be made for experiential knowledge, or if nobody knows where those students are, is there a class about the prison industrial complex? So that folks that maybe they don't want to talk about it, or maybe they just want to understand themselves in context, can go there first. And I know that this isn't possible for all community colleges and things like that, but those are the kind of things that, so there's that, because I was thinking about things that I would want to tell folks from community colleges. Making space, if possible, you know, I think that's really important, to make that space, whether there's that, you can have that class, you can have bringing in other groups, bringing in community orgs, things like that. But if the space isn't made for them, then they're not going to know where to go, you know? And I mean, I really think it's as simple as that when it comes to it. But I know that's not simple within community colleges and things like that, or within any type of administration. But I think it's integral to finding those students, because if I would have, it doesn't matter now, you know? So I don't want to say if I would have found it when I was there, because I succeeded how I succeeded. But with those specialized relationships, those aren't always going to happen. So what about other structures that can be built in that can bring those relationships in? You know, what about different types of hand-holding with those types of students? And I think it has to be structures built in so that it's not temporary with the students that are there. I think that's very important. We also wanted, when we were at UC Davis, we wanted a list of folks that we could go to, that we wanted counselors that we could go to that might be versed with what some of the needs for system-impacted folks might be. We wanted to know the people in each department that could be our allies or co-conspirators and things like that. We're still working on that. They're working on that. But I think that's important as well. And you know, in thinking of those 11 years in school, it's funny because at one point someone told me, well, you should already have a graduate degree, you know, and maybe that's true, but that experiential knowledge that I got from the things that, from my experiences, from the systems that I was a part of, that's a whole other level of education that students have, you know, that folks have that are coming out. It's just, how do we make space for those types of dialogues? And I really believe that the specificity of whomever that person is going to invite other specificity in others, and that's how, what does Audre Lorde say, like, our differences make us stronger, you know? So that's my pitch to you all when it comes to student success and strengthening student success for formerly incarcerated and system-impacted folks. With having those spaces, I mean, I know it's political to say, but with having those spaces, that's also hopefully helping folks to understand themselves in context, and to because it was really helpful. I remember when I first read a sociology study about Latino students and how they struggled more because they didn't have the family members to help them because they're first gen and things like that. I was a first gen college student. So understanding myself within context of those other institutions really helped me to be able to also build community later, and then to understand, wait, I am not an isolated event. I'm a product of histories. I'm a product of certain institutions and things like that. And that just gave me footing to understand myself better, and then to be able to go out and build community with other folks, you know? So that's my pitch as far as that. And then how much longer do I have? About 5 minutes? I wanted to I'll talk to you all a little bit about like our zines and stuff, but I wanted to close with a quote, and I want to quote Cherie Moraga. But you know, with our zines and with all those other things, those are things that also I think, where can spaces be for folks to be exploring those types of things, right? Zines are ways I've seen at other colleges that, because they're so cheap and so easy and propaganda, that they can be passed out and things like that, you know? And those kinds of things can be people making their own media, you know? So I think that's what I would hope for other folks as well. It doesn't have to be this, but just ways for folks to find their own avenue of entry point, and then to continue to understand and to research and things like that. So bringing me back to being here now, I'm really thankful to be here. It's an interesting thing looking around and knowing that these are all that you all are administrators. And I don't know, I'm really honored for that. I'm looking forward to the roundtable if anyone has any questions. I have a lot of ideas. And then I'm really interested in meeting you all. I know I didn't give you my whole story, because there's a lot of stuff there, and it's also realizing that when we ask folks to speak, what context are they speaking in, and things like that, Because I got a lot of cards that I'm like, gosh, do I want to pull out all those things of those traumas and things like that? And in certain settings, I do want to, and in certain settings, it is appropriate. And then in other ones, and that comes with context and learning how to speak and things like that. But I really hope that you all come and speak to me if you have any other additional questions and things like that. And I want to close actually with a Cherie Moraga quote that it's a little heavy-handed, but I think in this setting, you all will be fine with it. I mean, it's about education, so I think it'll work. Cherie Moraga is one of my living heroes. So we put a lot of quotes within our zines for folks to maybe look up other people. So this one says, may we want more than justice. May we want an education which honors the bodies on the margins, our own and that of our ancestors, as the repository of knowledges capable of transforming this benighted nation we still dare to name home. Thank you.
So now you see why I was very aggressive in making sure that we could have Tina with us here, sharing her story. And obviously it's your personal story, but these students are in your classrooms right now, and they're not sure it's safe. They're not sure it's safe to reveal their full selves, and that they're not going to be judged. And so we need to look at ourselves, and we need to look at, are we creating that safe space so that students can bring their whole selves into our classrooms, into our institutions. So thank you again, Tina, for coming and sharing with us. And as she mentioned, she is holding